It's my pleasure to be joined here by Senator Kevin Cook from District 32. So without any further ado, Senator Cook, can you tell me about, how you ended up at this place where you're in the Senate, you chose to run, and yeah, how did you get there?
All right. Yeah. So I moved to Idaho Falls and I bought a little gentleman farm. We had about 13 acres and we raised cows and horses and had a lot of fun. But my kids were into sports, not the farm like I was. But anyway, I shared irrigation ditches with Dean Mortimer, who was the current senator for years, and would stand out in the ditch and we would talk about irrigation, we'd talk about religion and politics. And those three things are pretty touchy subjects in the state of Idaho, especially irrigation. And yet we stayed friends through the whole thing, and just a great man. And I'd always been interested in politics, but actually to talk to a senator was something new to me. Um, but along the way, he said that he was retiring, and I think I ran home and told my wife, says, "Hey, what do you think about Senator Mortimer's retiring? What do you think about if I was to throw my hat in the ring?" And we talked about it for quite a while. We sat the kids down, talked about it, and decided to try it and run for it. And so this is the end of my second term, and so right in the middle of campaigning for my third term. But it has been a real ride, ups and downs, and I've enjoyed it, learned a lot, and a lot still to learn.
Yeah, so you were elected right in 2020. I mean, of all the years to start in going into politics, it's like we went off the edge of the map at that point. We're in uncharted territory.
Very, very true. We had lots of discussion and fighting about how do we do COVID, mandate vaccines and closures, mandatory masks. And so if you go back in that year and saw all the things that was legislated, what we wanted to vote or not vote on, and it was it was really a good education for me to start off that way. But it was like drinking from a fire hose, by all means.
Well, speaking of a fire hose, you mentioned irrigation was one of the big issues in Idaho. I grew up in Western Washington, where our concerns about water are what to do with all of it. And the first time I saw a different perspective, I was visiting my uncle on his land out in Colorado, and he was talking about irrigation and how the municipality was trying to line the irrigation ditches to preserve the water, but it was going to reduce the aquifer. I'd never thought of it that way, and then I've heard people talking about the same issue here in Idaho. So obviously that's a big issue. What has the legislature done, and what should they continue to do to make sure that that resource is available to everyone?
It is a huge issue, especially for my constituents right now. So there's kind of a little bit of fighting between us and the Twin Falls area in the water because we use the groundwater, we pump it up, and so over the years they have some pretty cool things to measure the aquifer and how much water is in there. Just amazing. But over the years, they show that the aquifer has slowly gone down. And so what does that do to the Twin Falls area? Well, there's a place called Thousand Springs. I don't know if you've ever been there, but all this water seeps back into the Snake River through the side of the mountain cliff there, through these rocks, very porous rocks, and water just comes out and fills the Snake River back up. In fact, it's about, I think it was last year or this summer, we went on a tour and they showed us a spot where they took all the water out of the Snake River. There was no water in the Snake River. Everything was diverged to farm ground. And so you looked and you saw the water that was taking out, and you look behind and here's the Snake River, and there's no water there. And I said, well, how far down before this starts picking up? And he says, down at Thousand Springs. And that's where all this water from the aquifer starts filling it back up into the Snake River. So this whole thing is just amazing to me of smart people that know about this water and what we need to do. And so there's lots of discussion. How do we fill up the aquifer? And so we've done a lot of things to try and do that. We've, as far as legislators, I don't remember the amount of money, but a good chunk of money, millions of dollars that we've allocated for studying and trying to figure out what we need to do. Um, Here in southeast Idaho, they've done a lot of things to try and be more efficient with watering. A lot of them are sprinkling, and so sprinkling they found is a lot more efficient. They can say, "Oh, I've got enough water, shut it off," as opposed to flood irrigation. They've got places where they've got some very porous, and so they dig out the ground, a big porous area, they fill water in it and let it kind of seep through and get down to the aquifer. So a lot of work, and there are some real smart people that know about water in the state of Idaho. And obviously, our life depends on water, but also our agriculture. And agriculture is a huge economic boost for the state of Idaho. So it's not like we can say, "Oh, forget agriculture." No, you can't do that. It's huge, and personally, I like to eat. So
I like to eat too, maybe a bit too much. Uh, that is something within the Republican Party, since I've been watching politics, there's been, I think, a debate over what's the role of government in these things. Um, a lot of people say, well, it's to protect life, liberty, and property, and that's it. Let's shrink it down to that size. And then I believe others say, well, there are things that government can and should do to facilitate things, like we were just talking about water. Obviously, it's a shared resource, so there has to be some neutral third party to adjudicate that. And when it comes to agriculture, there's a lot of intertwining between government and industry. How how do you manage that from a legislative perspective? How do you try and hold to the small government principles, but also make sure that the system keeps running?
well, maybe just on the water. I've been to several meetings, and a lot of the discussion was, guys, if you guys can figure it out without the legislators getting involved, that's all the better. As legislators, we aren't experts on the water. There's other people that are, and it's just, anytime you can figure it out between you and the neighbor, and you don't have to get government or law or police or lawyers involved, that's tons better. And that goes across the board for water or whatever you want to have. But there are times where the government should be involved. As the chairman of the Commerce and Human Resource Committee on the Senate side, one of the big things that I try to do is to get the red tape, eliminate red tape as much as possible, and only have the lightest touch of government. And some say, "Well, I don't want the government anything." Well, if you want to get your produce or your products to market, I think you do want the government involved. We do invest in roads and in highways and in bridges. We invest in water treatment. We invest in electrical grid systems. And so there's a lot in your schools and universities. Okay, if you need some employees that are trained and skilled and educated, um, we as a government, we've trying to do that. And so that's part of that infrastructure, not only the roads and highways and bridges, but educated people to help that. And so government gets involved, and sometimes we get more involved than we should, and that's absolutely, I agree with that. And so it's really hard to say, okay, where's that line at? Have we crossed it? Do we need to back up a little bit? And there's times we've crossed it, times we need to back up, and hopefully we find over the years we find that nice sweet spot that we should remain.
You mentioned training employees, and the launch grant came through your committee last year, I believe. Um, and obviously, a lot of the debate over that has been, should the government be, using tax dollars to, help high school graduates get their training? And one of the suggestions is, why not just have the companies train their own workers? So why do we need it?
Good question. So we definitely we invest our money in K through 12.
Mhm.
And a lot of people say, yeah, you do K through 12, and that's in the Constitution, but you shouldn't be involved with universities or any training after that. Well, we are heavily involved financially in our universities, in our colleges, and that. So we are already involved. Speaking of launch now, launch is not a new program. It's new to the high school level, but launch has been around for maybe 5 years, 5 or 6 years. And what it was though is, say you got those people that graduate from high school and kind of fall off the map. They're just enjoying life and don't have any need for money at this point. They're traveling Europe. They're living in mom and dad's basement or on the beach or whatever. And then life kind of hits and say, oh, I guess I need to grow up and get a job. And so that's what launch was for then is, okay, now we've got some returning adults. This is, I need to get a job. I need to have retrained. And so they would come into launch and we would help them. And on an average, the people that graduated from launch increased their salary by $16,000. So what that does, that takes a person that was a social taker to all of a sudden to a community contributor that has some funds that, hey, I can live on my own and I can start contributing, whether that's a soccer coach or just paying taxes. But now they're able to help out. And so launch has been great success. And so a couple of years ago, last year, we looked at, so what happens if we do that with the high school kids? Because we've got this infrastructure working really good for businesses. But the thing that they're missing is skilled, trained employees. In fact, you look at INL, you look at the computer company there in Boise, the great big one. Can't remember the name now.
Micron.
Micron, yeah. Some of their great scientists, where are they getting them? They're not getting them from Idaho. They're pulling them from outside of the state. And so we need to get our kids back into technology. I've often said, as a computer geek, software engineer for years, for 35 years, America has been the king of technology for over a century now. We have been on top of everything. But if you look at the last couple of decades, that gap is starting to close with some of the other countries around. And so we can sit back and say, well, that's fine. We don't need to worry about it, or we need to do something. I want to do something. I think we have to, because if we want to stay a free nation, it's no longer fighting face to face. It's no longer with a bayonet. It's hitting a button and a bomb flies across the nation and hits somebody, or you're sitting in your air-conditioned place and you're flying a drone and dropping bombs. So technology is a must. And if we are going to stay a free nation, we got to have technology. And that's what launch does. Launch will help those kids get technology in their heads and keep us as a free nation. James Madison, one of our forefathers, and I'm going to butcher this quote, I was looking for it, but he said that the educators will for always govern the ignorance. It's close to that. But that's how I feel. I feel that launch is a must.
Do you think there's enough incentive for students to, once they complete their training or whatever, to stay in Idaho and, be our productive citizens?
Absolutely. I can't think of a better state. I mean, you've got the wide open outdoors, and yet you've got the culture that you want as well. So I love Idaho, and I think most people that grow up here love it. Now, coming from Southeast Idaho, it's very cold in the winter, but you have to have a winter sport in order to enjoy Southeast Idaho, or you won't stay here. And so there's lots of things to do in Southeast Idaho during the winter months.
So talking about your region and your district, one thing I've noticed in these conversations is that there's so many different geographic regions in the state that are, have very different outlooks on things, very different priorities. I'm looking at the map over here. You've got you've got the enclave of Idaho Falls in District 33 right in there, but then you've got everything surrounding that. What are some of the unique challenges of your district, of the residents there, and what are their priorities? What are they worried about?
Oh, so we call our area the Donut Hole. Donut Hole is the Legislative District 33, which is Senator Lent, and then we go outside of it. So we're considered the donut. So it takes in the rest of Bonneville County Ammon, and kind of the outskirts of Idaho Falls. So I really have a lot of the farming area, but also Ammon, which is huge, which is growing very, very fast. A lot of people there, so we've got a lot of young families there as well. So I guess one of the big things that we look at here is we touched on first was water. Water is huge for our agriculture up here, and it's a big part of my area. The other thing I think is concerning is growth. I mean, the whole state for the last 5 years, 6 years, we have been in the top five of the fastest growing state in the nation. So growth is a concern. Everywhere you look at, your farm ground is being taken, and they're putting houses, and they're putting up huge apartment complexes. And so we want to grow because we want our kids and grandkids to stay, but we want to manage that growth. And I think that's what we need to do. And that comes from getting involved, knowing the candidates, knowing the issues, and going and voting. Otherwise, we sit back and we complain and says, "Oh my gosh, everything is terrible." Well, okay, we got to get involved. And so that's a part. And then education. I think education is a big issue here. And I personally, my kids have went through the public education system, and I hear lots of complaints about education. And I've often asked, "Have you went and volunteered at the school? Have you sat down and watched and saw what goes on in there?" And most of them says, "No, no." Well, I can tell you, I have done that. For the last 8 or 9 years, I work at the INL as a software engineer, and I get every other Friday off. And on those Fridays off, if the teacher is able to let me in, I come in and I go spend an hour and read with those kids. And I have went and volunteered at several different schools throughout our area. And we have some incredible teachers. I have seen, I'll give you a quick couple of them though. We had one kid that came in mentally unstable. I mean, he was ready to rip everybody apart. And his teacher just stopped the class and said, "Okay, little Johnny, why don't you just put your head on the down there, take a rest, and when you're ready to get involved with our class, then we want you involved. But until now, you just take a rest." And it just settled everybody down. And he was like, "Oh, okay, I'm not going to get the attention I wanted." Put his head down, and he went off the class. We had another teacher that they were giggling and laughing during the Pledge of Allegiance. And as a legislator, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, what is this teacher going to do? She going to stop them? Because I was like, "Oh, you got to do something. You can't let that happen." And she stood there with her hand over her heart and looked at that flag as we did the Pledge of Allegiance, and not a single word. And I just thought, "Oh, this is wrong." And then she turned around and she said, "Let me tell you something." And the tears were coming down her eyes. And you could have heard a pin drop in this room. Not a word from these kids. They just stood there, their eyes wide open, their mouth open, and listened to this teacher. And she said, "I am an immigrant. I went through the proper channels, though, and I want to tell you about what it means to me to be a citizen of America and what my lifestyle was before I came here." And she just cried. And she impressed those kids. I don't think there's a kid there that will ever forget what this teacher told them and taught them about being a citizen of America, the United States of America, and what it means. And so we got some incredible teachers. We've got kids that are graduating, that are going to Yale, that are going to Harvard, going to Naval Academy. We have some great kids. And those same kids that are doing these incredible things, they don't have a different teacher than all the other kids do. And so we just need to say, "Hey, give the teachers the help that they need, but quit beating them up." Because I think we got some great teachers. Now, does that mean we don't have any bad apples in the batch? No, of course we do. We have bad newspaper people, bad engineers, software engineers. We have bad legislators. But I guess what I'm trying to say is don't use this big broad paintbrush and say all teachers are bad, because that is not true. We've got some incredible teachers here in Bonneville County, and our education is doing well, going to improve. Absolutely. And we're working to do that as legislators, and I know our teachers are as well, and as parents. Parents, we've got to get involved with that as well. It's just no matter what program we do, if parents aren't involved, it's not going to work for that kid. Parents are the key. So
Yeah, you talk about painting with a broad brush. That's one thing I've been learning with having conversations with people all the way all throughout the state is that you start with a broad brush, but then you start looking closer, and it has to get more and more finely detailed. But I guess that begs the question then, uh, how does a legislature that comes to Boise to meet for a few months every year, how do you craft laws that work for everyone? Um, because it really is different throughout the state. Some schools are better than others. Some communities have more support. Some there's more tax bases. How do you balance that?
that is a great question, and that's where you're like, hey, do we as state legislators want to control the state, or do we have local control, local school boards that need to be doing their job, local county commissioners, local mayors? We can't and should not get down into local area. And I'm going to tell you, we're guilty sometimes of doing that, even this last legislation, but we need to make sure we pull back and let the locals do their thing. We passed the school facility bill,
Mm.
which is huge in my book. I think it needed to be done. But at the debate that I had here in I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, one of the questions was what makes you the right as a state legislator to come down and build a school building and not give me any right to say yay or nay? And I said, well, we didn't do that. So what we did do is we gave a certain percent. So there are still skin in the game. We did not say, here's 100% of the money to go build you a new high school or an elementary school. It's not there. There's not enough money. But we're giving you a certain percent. It's based on how many students you have, and you'll get a hunk of money. And so we've got two school districts in my area. We've got Idaho Falls District 91 and Bonneville County District 93. And they're going to get a hunk of change, but there's not enough money to take care of all their facilities. And so there's still going to be local skin in the game where they will vote on a bond, and it may pass and it may not pass. And so, and we had to do that because, it went before the Idaho Supreme Court, and it says, state, you've got to get involved. You need to do more of your part with the facilities. You can't just sit back and expect the natives, the locals to do everything. So I think that is a good example where we got involved, but not didn't take over the locals. There's still some skin in the game. We've just helped. So I hope that answers your question there.
While we're on education, may as well bring up the whole school choice thing. Obviously, in Idaho, we already have school choice in that parents can send their children to public schools, charter schools, private schools, micro schools, pod schools, or homeschool. I think that covers it. But there's obviously been a push for several years to have tax money follow the child to one of those alternative options. Just in general, what are your thoughts on that? And is there anything that should be changed about the current system, or do we just need to stay the course?
Oh, I think we have to continue to look at ways to change. I mean, the bulk of the way we've done school is the same way we've been doing it for the last century, last maybe 2 centuries. I mean, we haven't changed that much. Now in Idaho, we have lots of different school choice. Probably more so, I've heard somebody say that we have more school choice in Idaho, more options than any other state. And I don't know if that's true, but I know that we have an awful lot. We have a whole bunch. In Idaho Falls alone, we have a Elevate that's just coming to town. We have a charter school that just started a new high school. We've got the Bonneville Technology High School. We've got District 91. They just started a CET high school. And then with all of that, as you mentioned, you've got a bunch of different options where you can do a high school within a high school or a classroom within a classroom. And so we got lots of options. Um, Now, the big one that came up this session, though, was a voucher system. Can we take state money and go give it to a private school? And there's lots of talk about whether that's legal or not. I'm not a lawyer, but from what I've been heard is, yes, you can do that, but as soon as you do that, you open the door for everything. Now, the concept, I often say the concept of school choice, everybody should be for that, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we're all for that. However, we don't vote on concepts. Legislators don't vote on concepts. They vote on the words of the bill. And I was trying to find the bill. I have it printed out here somewhere. I wanted to read part of that so that you knew exactly what it said. But when you get down to the words of the bill, it basically says that any private school that takes money from the state, that the state has no say whatsoever on what they teach, how they teach, where they teach, what they do. You have no say, no recognition of or accountability for that money whatsoever. So maybe this is an extreme, but I think it drives home my point. We could be giving money to a private school, and that private school could be teaching socialism or communism or Satanism or whatever you have, and we can't have any say in that matter. And that's the way that bill was written. And so the concept, the idea is good, but the words of the bill, there's just no way as a member of JFAC could I ever support such a bill. And I don't think any of my constituents would support me in doing that either.
What's is there a way to make the launch grant apply to, grade schools? Because it's I don't know, it seems like that has more options than once you're in K-12.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I'm not sure where you're going with it. Launch
Uh,
grant is basically after you graduate from high school.
sure. I'm just wondering what the fundamental difference is because obviously the launch grant goes to certain industries that are in demand as, determined by the Workforce Development Council. Uh, but are there stipulations on that? Do they have to teach certain curricula or do they have to what's the accountability there? I'm
Okay,
comparing the two things in my head.
I got you. I'm with you now. So the accountability in that, and we tightened that up this year
Mhm.
because the first year we did it, and we've learned some from that as we looked at it, and as people looked at it and started yelling and screaming, said, "Oh, you're right. We've got some holes there." And I think that's happens with all bills. There is no perfect bill, but hopefully we can refine it and get it better. So this year we tightened that down. We put some sideboards on it. Um, One of the things that we really looked at was what is considered an in-demand career. One of the things that in demand, if you go to every restaurant or fast food store, they need waiters, they need hamburger cookers, and so you think, oh, great, let's go get $8,000 from the state of Idaho so I can go flip burgers. And nothing wrong with that career at all. I'm not saying that, but that a waiter was part of that. And I said, well, that's not quite what we're after. You know, we want something a little more detailed, a little more involved, that you can be more of a contributing member of society that pays taxes. Okay,
Mhm.
that's basically it. And so we narrowed that down and says, no, this needs to be more of a benefit to the state of Idaho. And so we've narrowed that down. The other thing is we've narrowed it down and say, okay, well, let's say I go to college and I think, oh, this is really fun. And if most of college people are like me on my first year, I paid for my first year the rest of my life because of my grades were so terrible. I had a great time my freshman year. Well, we're not going to do that. Okay. If you're screwing around and you're not doing the things that you need to do to get some good grades, and you say, well, you know what, I'm dropping out, I'm not going to pursue that. Fine, but you need to pay the money back.
Hmm.
And so it's not a free handout. You go have fun and enjoy your college career and not get anything out of it at the end. You got to have something at the end. We're willing to work with you. You certainly got a 6 month window that you're like, hey, I got to go find myself. Okay, fine. But when you come back, you need to get back involved and stay there. So it doesn't do that. It doesn't pay for your housing. It pays for tuition fees. And so there's a lot of a misconception about launch, what it pays, what it does. Uh, but it does keep track of those students, what they're doing with that money, where are they at with their grades, where are they at with their education, and is it something that's going to benefit Idaho? And so, again, I think Launch is a good program. There's just a lot of information out there that's not quite right, and a lot of information based off of the first year that we set it. And they haven't quite heard about what we did this year, because we really did tighten that up.
Shifting gears a little bit, still talking about money. Right at the end of the session, the disagreement over the building for the Idaho Transportation Department came to a head. And I remember watching you in the Senate present um, the budget bill that undid that sale. Um, and honestly, this is an issue that, I've got friends, Republican friends who are very divided on it. Some people say, no, the numbers say we should keep the building and renovate it. Others say, no, they don't. But then there are still others who say, well, the government shouldn't be holding property anyway. That's just, that return the money to the taxpayer. So, um, as briefly as possible, I guess, can you explain why the legislature chose to um, hold on to that building, and what's, how do the numbers add up?
Okay. Well, if you watch the legislative session, you know how passionate I am about this. I spent a lot of time on that, the Idaho Transportation Department budget.
Mhm.
There are three big elephants in the room. One was they wanted to hire 53 new employees. And I was all for that, because over the past, since 2008, I think, they had gotten rid of 153 employees. And at the same time, our our population increased, the number of miles, average miles people drove on our roads increased, and so we needed those people. And so I had no problem. The second elephant is the moving and rebuilding building a brand new building in Twin Falls. So moving the District 4 headquarters from Shoshone into Twin Falls. And I went and looked at the building. I went and looked at the assessment that was made of the building, read the document. The building was in good condition. It was solid. It definitely had some maintenance issues. Okay, it had a leak. The sealant on the roof had expired. It was supposed to be replaced back in 2019, and it wasn't done. And so we said, no, we're going to leave you there, and we're going to fix that building up and save it there, and save, I think it was $31 million, I think. I could be wrong on that one, but there was several $1,000,000. And then the one that we really fought on, and I shouldn't say fought, but debated on, was so in January of 2021, I think, they came back from Christmas vacation, and the building had flooded. One of the pipes had burst, and it had flooded all the way from the third floor, second floor, to the first floor. And but it was an isolated area. It wasn't the whole building, so it was isolated. But I went and toured it. Okay, I wanted to see for my own eyes. And they said, yeah, when we opened the elevator, the doors came open and water came rushing out. He says the interesting is the old elevator still works. The new elevator doesn't work at all because of all the water. But it says we opened the doors to the staircase, and it was, here's the water coming out the door, and the water was just trickling down the staircase like a waterfall. And so the building had some serious problems. But we looked at that, and we says, okay, well, the building is still in good condition. It's solid. It's old, but there's nothing wrong with it. Now we do need to fix it up because of the water damage. Okay. And so we looked at that. We looked at, okay, well, if we get rid of this property and we move to the Chinden campus and build a new building there, we would, or not build a new building, because they were going to move into building 4. I think it was building 4. And we had already allocated money to fix up building 4, to do the asbestos abatement and fix it all up so it was livable. And so that was already in the process. Well, in November, the JFAC, Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, we went on a tour. One of the tour stops was to talk to ITD, and they presented this idea of what they'd done, that they had sold the property, and previous year to that, they says, well, we believe we can get 80 to $100 million out of this property. And by the time we build the outbuildings that we need in Chittenden campus and move to and renovate the existing building, it will be a total wash. No money needed. Everything's okay, great. Well, we come back in November of 2023, and they says, well, it didn't go as much as we wanted. You know, the estimate came back at 30 million, and we sold it for 51, I think is what it was. And we're like, what? How could you do that? You told us it was 80 to 100 million. You just moved forward and says, well, sorry, it's done deal. Nothing you can do about it. So we were a little upset about it because now we got the taxpayers online for another $50 million, and we lose the land, which is ideal land. So we're a little upset about it. However, we come back in January of this year, and we come to find out it has not been sold. Nobody has signed on the dotted line. The contract has not been released. No money has exchanged, no earnest money, nothing has been done. And so on March, and so we met with the legal department, with the lawyers, and says, is there a deal? Have we sold this property? Are we obligated to continue on? And they said, no, there is no deal. They have discussed it. They have awarded it to the people, but there is nothing signed. There is no money. So on March 1st, 5 months after they awarded it to the people, the buyers, 5 months, by March 1st, still no signature, no contract, no money. And so at that time, the JFAC voted on the ITD budget, which included do not sell the property, keep it there. And we were going to renovate the building. And so total amount of money, well, let me keep going there. So that happened on March 1st. On March 18th, they finally signed, the buyers signed their part of the contract. The state has still not signed theirs. Okay, then we go, the budget has already been passed through JFAC. It comes to the House and to the Senate, and another big blow up about what's going on. But there was no deal. There was no sale. There was nothing on the books for this sale. We ended up saving the taxpayers for the ITD budget as a whole $110 million. So do the numbers match up? Absolutely, they do. It is by far the best that Idaho constituents would want, taxpayers would want. $110 million saving, and there was no argument about the savings. The argument about was, well, we need to get rid of that building. And you brought it up in your discussion. Says, should the state be holding property? Should we be giving that back to Boise so they can collect property tax on it? And that was one of the arguments. Well, the state of Idaho, about in 2018, I believe, they decided, you know what, we're going to sell some of the property around the Capitol Mall area. And they did. And 2 years later, they had seller's remorse, and they went back, oh, we shouldn't have done that. We want that back. It's best for the taxpayers if we keep that. So they went back and tried to buy some of it. They says, oh, sure, you can buy it back, but it's going to be double the price. And so every time the state has sold property, there has been a seller's remorse, and they felt bad about it. It just financially did not make sense to sell it. And so I am very much pro of what we did with the ITD budget and revoking the sale. That I think it was a very smart thing to do. Now, lots of people will argue with me on that, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, even amongst my circles, my friends, it was pretty divisive. You know, people had strong feelings one way or the other, and I'm just trying to figure it out. It's one of those complex issues.
One day when I'm in Boise and you got a lot of time, I'll sit down, I'll show you the numbers and walk you through it. And you might not agree with me, but at least let me show you the numbers and see what you come up with.
Well, I've had you for about 45 minutes now, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But while I have you here, the mobile phone filter, that's been an issue of yours for a couple of years, and I wanted to make sure I didn't skip that one. I have 5 children. I've given the older 2 phones, but they are incredibly locked down. No SIM cards, no browsers. Screen time shuts it off at a certain point at night. They can just listen to music after that. They can only text, their parents and grandmas and each other. But that, I come from an IT background as well, 20 years in desktop support and network administration. So I have the ability to do that. And I guess my question is with children being as curious as they are. I remember when I was doing desktop support at a school district, a public school district in Washington. One of the things we could do is just log in remotely to computers to do maintenance and such. And I remember logging in remotely and found, students on this when it's a library computer. But I noticed they were on what looked like the Harvard University website, but it wasn't. It was a fake site, and the search bar was actually a built-in VPN so that they could bypass the filters. So I got that locked down after having seen that, but it just reminded me that they will find ways around things. So uh, I'm sure you and I agree we need to do something about what these children are seeing on phones. How do we go about doing that?
Okay. Well, my bill helps that. Is it the golden egg that resolves and solves all pornography problems for kids? No, it is not. It is a very, very narrow bill. But it's narrow because we couldn't get it across. And so we kept making it narrow and narrow. So what my bill does is basically it says, if you enable or activate, if you activate your mobile device phone within the state of Idaho for a minor, then enable the parental filtering software, period. So what does that do to my First Amendment right as an adult? Not a thing. I would never know the difference when this bill was passed. I would still get my morning cup of pornography all I wanted. It doesn't interrupt that. But it gives me as a parent the tools that maybe I am not an IT savvy person. I don't know the first thing about it. But it gives me a parent an idea that, oh, okay, my kid isn't going to get to pornography. Okay. Now, some said, well, yeah, you give them a false sense of security. I says, that's silly. I says, is that what you think of when we have cars with uh, airbags and side bags and anti-lock brakes and good tires on that, oh, just go out and drive, you're not going to get hurt? No, you still warn your kid, drive safe. And oh, there's snow on the road, I'm not going to let you drive today, I'm going to take you to school. So that false sense of security is just no way. I don't buy that at all. But it gives the parent, I can still turn it off. I can turn this and no, I want my kid to see pornography. Great. I can turn it off and allow them to see it. But it does turn on the filter. Now, in the state of Idaho, we recognize that that pornography is harmful to children. We have a law about the distribution of pornography to children. So this is in line of what we should be doing anyway. You think about, when I was a youth, if I wanted to see pornography, it was put up on the other side of the clerk's desk, the cashier's desk, up high where I couldn't reach it. And it was in a sealed cellophane bag, and it had a cardboard paper in front of the title page, and so you couldn't even see the picture. So, and yet that was great for my era. But yet now we give a mobile device to children that don't even have still pictures, that has movies and videos, and it has the real thing. And yet, well, we can't do anything with that. No, we have to. We have to. It has been proven by medical professionals that the earlier these children get into pornography, the more it will affect their development of their brain. And so we need to fix this. I talked to you about the bill was narrow, and it is. So it doesn't, it's only good for your cell phone, your mobile device, not for your desktop, not for your Xbox. Doesn't do anything for those. And so it's just too narrow. And some say, well, it doesn't go far enough, I'm not going to vote for it. Well, for heaven's sakes, if it saves one kid, and especially if it's my kid, it was worth it. And this will save the kids from those who are innocently stumbling onto pornography. That's what it's going to save. If the kids that are like, I've got to have my pornography, they're going to find a way around it. But this is one step. There's often talk about, and you as an IT person, you've got an IT stack, and there's different levels at all of this. You've got your internet providers, you got your context providers, and your Wi-Fi and all of that stuff up there. In my opinion, you've got to have something to block that pornography on every level if we're going to really get serious about blocking pornography from our children. And this was for children to keep them safe. And so it passed the Senate this year, but it got held up in the House State Affairs Committee. And I'm hoping next year that we can work it and get it through, because it'll help our kids really well. It's a good bill.
Yeah. Knowing, I'm just old enough to have grown up with the internet. It came about when I was a teenager. Knowing what's out there, sometimes I think the best thing to do would just be to, get rid of the whole thing. Yeah.
Yes. And in fact, I went to a anti-pornography conference. It's been several years, but one of the things they talked about, it said virtual reality. He says the time is coming when your kids won't just be watching videos, but in virtual reality, they will be able to participate and take part of it. And I thought, okay, if we get to that point, what 14, 15-year-old young man will be able to walk away from that? That will just control his life at that age. And so we need to get a handle on this now rather than later. And I just, again, it helps parents. It gives parents tools. It does not take your First Amendment right away. It helps our children, and the state of Idaho already recognizes that pornography is harmful for our children. So it's in the law books, and this just helps that.
So I do appreciate your time here. Is there anything else we haven't covered, or any closing statements?
Yes, May 21st. That's when our primary. And so I would encourage you and ask you and plead with you that you would consider me and cast your vote for me on May 21st at the primaries. I'm a very conservative Republican. I work hard. I don't just look at special interest groups. I go research. I go visit the sites. I make sure what the money is going for, and make sure it's good for Idaho and good for you as a taxpayer. And so I'd appreciate your vote. So thank you.
Senator Kevin Cook, District 32. Thank you.